Uh, uh, okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Remove. Okay. We're not approved for LinkedIn Live yet. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? I am Tequila Smith, CEO and Principal Consultant of Kemet Educational Services, and I want to welcome you to our STEMport programs, Cupcakes and Konvos. So our Cupcakes and Convos is just our way to build community among parents so you can have questions and just learn from other parents about things that they do really, really well. And so our guest today is my friend, Dr. LaToya Myles, and we're talking about managing your calendar, which is important on any given day, but especially during this pandemic. So I'm going to tell you a story about why when I wanted to discuss this topic, I thought LaToya would be the perfect person for it. Not only is she a busy federal administrator with, a lot of responsibilities, children, wife, but a couple of years ago, we were attending a conference together, and LaToya opened her Google Calendar, and it was all these colors. I learned from LaToya that you could have color coded Google Calendars. And I was asking her, like, what is this about? It's so many colors are coming up on your screen. And she was just explaining, the many calendars that allow her to manage, her own responsibilities, as LaToya, managing her children, managing her family. And so when I decided to resume these cupcakes and convos, I knew that, especially with the pandemic, a lot of us, our routines have changed, and this would be the perfect way to discuss how we can still manage a calendar. For me, the days that I actually have something on my calendar, it allows me to maintain some sense of normalcy when everything else seems kind of crazy, right? So without further ado, I'm just going to start my conversation with Dr. LaToya Myles. So my first question, LaToya, is how are you doing? Because we're 7 months into the pandemic. You're working from home, right? And you're managing your children. How are you doing? And how are you managing everything?
Well, I have to use one of my favorite quotes is, trouble comes sideways. And so I think 2020 has definitely come sideways at all of us, but we're managing. My children and I, like so many other people, had an abrupt change and shift in our schedules and the daily activities that we had back in March. And we had to adjust to working from home for me, for them. Their schools closed and they were at home full time with me. My husband was still working outside of the home, but it was definitely a shift overall for our family. And we settled into kind of a new normal, I guess you'll call it. Eventually, it wasn't easy by any means. We had to get used to the fact that mommy has conference calls and Google Meets, Zoom meetings, and Skypes, and, come up with a signal for them to understand when I was busy and working. But then I also realized I had to carve out time in my schedule to spend with them during the day so that we could talk and we could spend time. Because while it was difficult being at home, it was also really an opportunity for us to talk and play games and get to know each other and spend more time together as a family too.
So how does your calendar change? In what ways have you adapted it? Well, let me start back before I say, how did you end up what I call the calendar of many colors? Like, how did you start that process and how is it helpful? And why is that an option for some parents to be able to do, to be more structured and organized?
Yes, so I think you were breaking up
you
right at the end there, but I want to respond to the part of the question that I did. And
okay.
Yeah. And that was the fact that, I have always been a calendar person. I've always been someone who has really thrived on having a schedule. And so I'll take that back to even being in high school and undergrad. I had that paper day planner that I wrote things down in so that I didn't forget. And having a Gmail account, I realized what a useful tool Google Calendar is, along with a whole other suite of tools. And using the calendar, I realized I could have not only my work calendar, but also my own individual personal calendar. And even though my kids were very young, I was able to set up calendars, sub-calendars for each of them that were color-coded, like you said. And then I also had, calendars for my husband and I and our activities. And it has become a tool that I go to on a regular basis. I tell anyone, if you're inviting me to an event or you're asking me to participate in an activity and we're talking verbally, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face pre-COVID, it's great to tell me, but you've got to follow up with me in writing, because I'm one of those people that if it's not on my calendar, I can easily forget about it. And I don't want to do that. I want to be able to follow through with my commitments. And so having them on the calendar helps me be able to do that.
Okay. And so what are some strategies that you think that are good for people who, want to start managing a calendar, and how do, some strategies for them to manage multiple calendars, right? Because you don't want to feel, money and the benefit of having the multiple calendars like you have.
So one of the big benefits of a multiple calendar system that I use is the fact that in Google, and I'm sure in many other platforms, you can turn that calendar on and off. So if you want to view everyone's calendar, that's where I get that rainbow of calendars with all the colors. But for example, I need to see my son's activities, but no one else's. I can uncheck all those boxes for the other calendars and just view his activities. And it makes it very simple and easy to do. I think if parents are getting ready to get started with maintaining a calendar for their families, I think they have to first think about what platform or type of calendar would work best for their family. Because while I use Google, there are a lot of different calendar platforms. There's a lot of different calendar apps that parents can use, and that could be useful just depending on their different situations. Thinking about, do you want a calendar that is online and available, whether you're on a computer, a laptop, iPad, cell phone, or do you want a paper calendar? Or do you want a calendar? Some people I know keep the kitchen calendar. They have a calendar in their kitchen that has all of their children's activities, their homework, etc. You have to find the right vehicle that's right for your family so that you can figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it. So once you make that first decision about the platform, whether it's paper or online, then the next decision is looking at what's best for you when it comes to how you schedule your calendar. There's different ways to do that, because you have events and activities, which is probably the one thing most people use, where you're scheduling a block of time, whether that's 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. You're scheduling a block of time for an event. But then on your calendar, you can also have a to-do list. I think many parents have a running to-do list in their head of things they need to do for their kids, whether it's picking up a poster board for a science fair project, or trying to determine if your kid needs colored pencils for school, or also many times having a running grocery list in your mind. You can use the to-do list app or part of a calendar in order to be able to that you can also do is to also think about who needs access to the calendar. When I started with my calendar, my children were quite young, so it didn't make sense for them to have access to the calendar. But as they've gotten older and have more individual responsibility for their after-school activities and group activities, it makes more sense now for them to be able to add and change events on the calendar on a regular basis. And that's pretty easy to do with the Google Calendar system that I use, but it could also be easily done as well with a paper calendar.
Okay, so in blocking your calendar, we are talking about, we focus on math, academic achievement. how much does having that calendar allow you to ensure, time for homework and study time? How important does managing that calendar ensure that your children have time for that and you have time to check homework?
It's actually critical for us because one of the things with our calendar that we utilize is we block out time for homework. And I
Okay.
do that not immediately after school because for my kids now, I feel like they need a break. That's what works best for our family.
Mhm.
And then we'll find time on our calendar where we're going to sit down and work on homework or we're going to study for whatever the weekly tests are. And being able to block that time out lets them understand when we need to start homeworking. And then also for them, it's also an opportunity to say when we need to stop. Like, okay, we studied everything we need to do for today, and now they can go and play their video game or have some really downtime before bedtime so that we're not all crunched in trying to rush everything together. So for academic achievement, I think it's great in that regard. And then another aspect is they also know what's coming up. Now that the kids are using more digital tools in school, a lot of times, for example, with my son's grade, all of their tests are posted in a calendar that they utilize on their laptop devices. But we also copy those onto our calendar so that he can know perhaps that in 3 days he's having a big social studies test, or in 2 days they're going to do a science experiment. And it helps us anticipate so that he can be better prepared academically.
And does it help sometimes, like if they're already in activities, knowing that they may not be able to go or they can only do certain things because their academic calendars are now integrated where they can kind of see? So, no, you can't go to that birthday party because I'm looking at your calendar and you have all this going on in school.
Absolutely, because it does help you with overlapping activities. There are many times that I'm thinking a birthday party, for example. We want to be able to go to the birthday party, but I can look on the calendar quickly on my phone and see we have a full day of activities. Or I can easily say, we have a full day of activities. However, you have a choice. If it's not an academic thing, perhaps it's something that we had planned to do as a family. Do you want to shift that activity to later so that you can attend this birthday party? And allows them to have some independence too as they get older, for making choices and trying to understand how they can manage their time well.
Do you think that there have been any changes in how you do your calendar, or has that calendar helped you manage the pandemic a little easier because you have was already had the calendar and structure for your family?
I think it has changed, particularly in the early days of the pandemic. My kids' calendars pretty much went from very busy every week to absolutely, and that was a really radical shift for us. We try not to overschedule our kids, but just because they have various interests and we like doing activities as a family, they almost always have, 2 to 3 extracurricular or family activities a week. Well, we went from doing that to doing absolutely nothing because we were all under stay-at-home orders and trying to stay safe inside. So it was a big adjustment for them. But what I have noticed as time wore on, a lot of those in-person activities have now shifted. So we're actually back to utilizing the calendar, but in a different way. Instead of the location being a physical location, it could be an online or a Zoom link that they're logging into for a different activity. So I think it's still useful and we're still using it in the same way, but there's a little bit of a different twist to it because we also don't have to figure in time for travel now because literally we're traveling 5 minutes from their bedroom to logging onto the computer to be able to participate.
So do you find yourself, because there's this joke that, man, I'm even late to the Zoom. So do you find like that punctuality that you have because you have such an organized calendar? Does that still carry on for the in-person events as well? Is it something that kind of, I mean, for the virtual events? I've been late to some Zoom stuff.
I have to admit, honestly, I have been late to some online events and activities. And part of mine sometimes is technical issues, honestly. But another tool that I use in Google Calendar a lot, and that you can use in whatever calendar platform, is that I actually try, if I have an hour-long meeting, I use kind of that quick scheduling tool that's built into Google Calendar so that my hour-long meetings don't last 60 minutes, they last 50 minutes. And my half-hour meetings last 25 minutes and not 30 minutes. And you would be amazed at just having that extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes of time allows you to have a break in between those meetings and actually be prepared for the next event without having to just log off of one online platform and log into another in the next minute. So having that buffer is really important too.
So the same buffer you have to drive, you need to have that. So you said an interesting point, that your kids are getting older. So when do you think is a good age to start giving your kids responsibility to help manage their calendar and or to turn it over completely to them? Or is that even possible until they go to college? Do you still need to manage their calendar as long as they're in your house? Especially if you have to take them places, right? Or spend money, right?
Yeah. I think that's part of it is, determining the age for any parent or loved one is, are you still involved in making sure that child arrives on time at any location? If so, then you need to be aware of their calendar so that you can make sure that they're prepared and on time. For me, my children, we actually started around age 10 because that's the age where we were actually, my husband and I, comfortable with them having a cell phone. And with that came the ability for them to access the calendar and to be able to understand how to use it. And I'll give you an example is just a couple of days ago, my daughter had asked if she could visit the library. She and a friend were going to work on a project and socially distanced at the library. And I said, yes, I think that's great. And then my second statement was, make sure you put it on the calendar. And she sat at her phone and entered it into the calendar, and it showed up on mine, and so that I could accept her. And I showed her how it looked so that she would understand about how calendar invitations work, how she's wording it, how to click on the various icons for adding the time, whether you want to add a notification in advance. And for her, it was really the first time that she has set up her own calendar invitation. And she was excited to have that responsibility.
So she wasn't like, dang, mama, you making me send you a calendar invite. So
because
your
now
kids can be excited about it, huh? Nobody is exempt.
It was because she was asking me to go to the library. Great, let's do it. Put it on the calendar.
But that is great. So you made an interesting point how you can share the burden with your kids and then they can actually be excited. Because I'm like, dang, she had to get on mommy's calendar. But you said she was excited to learn the tools and feel a level of independence of managing her own calendar, right? And her own schedule.
Okay,
you're back. I was just like, Tessie was like, your screen froze. I hope you didn't talk that much. But you were saying that she enjoyed the independence of it, right? So
Absolutely.
how so how did you get her excited? What made her excited where she didn't feel like, dang, I got to be on mommy's calendar? Is it because you've been ingrained in them the calendar, or it just her feeling that sense of independence, empowerment, like responsibility?
Oh, I think one of the aspects of that is she felt like she had the ability to manage her own time, and that she
Okay.
understood the value of her own time, and that this was an activity that she wanted to do, and she wanted to be able to do that with her friend. And I told her, I said, it sounds great, but her being able to schedule it really helped her understand that I'm making this choice to do this activity with my friend. I need my mommy to drive me there. There's a lot of background work as a parent, and many parents know this background work just to even have your kids show up at an event. And I think having her engaged with the calendar helps her see we don't just show up at the library at 11 a.m. We need to make sure we leave the house on time. We need to make sure that you're prepared with whatever paper or pencil or tools that you need so that you can be at the library to work on this project. And I think a lot of that goes to helping her plan in advance and really be considerate of her time, my time, as well as the time of her friend and the friend's mother to help make this activity meaningful for them.
So you make a great point, which I never really thought about engaging your kids and teaching them the calendar. It really isn't just about the colorful calendar. It's really how to manage yourself and your responsibilities, right? And planning and important skills they have to learn on their own. So I'm thinking like, wow, you have to do mommy calendar, but it's bigger than that, right? It is like, how do you manage self, right?
Exactly. How do you manage yourself? And one thing that they also know about my calendar is mommy has a time that she doesn't schedule anything so that mommy can have some me time. And I think that's critical for anyone, not just parents, to be able to have that time built in so that you can pursue your favorite hobby, or you can rest, or you can just have time to read or contemplate or do whatever feels right for you. And what I found sometimes, particularly with work calendars, is if you don't block off that time for yourself, someone else will. So you have to make yourself a priority in your calendar too. And I want my children to be able to see that.
So, do your children block off me time? Have you taught them to block off me time in their calendars?
So not yet, and mainly a lot of that
Okay.
is because with the pandemic right now, they aren't doing a whole lot of extracurricular activities. And so we
Mm,
do spend our weekends a lot of time doing me time, doing family time together. And we haven't gotten to that busyness of life again yet.
mhm,
And I don't see us getting back to that anytime in the near future. So not
mhm.
quite yet, but I do think eventually we'll be at that point where I will have to share with them that it's important to value your time overall, and it's also important to value yourself in your calendar as well.
So, I have a question about the integration, and I meant to ask it then, but I had moved on to the next thing. You were saying with your son's calendar, because your son is in middle school now, that with them becoming, more technology in their tools, the calendar actually pops up. So, how do you integrate that, into multiple formats to help him manage himself and his responsibilities and his assignments? Does he keep them in that calendar? Do you have him do like a whiteboard, or well, I'm sorry, you always laugh at engineers and this whiteboard our whiteboards, but do you have him do a whiteboard? Like, how do you have him, take it away from that platform in school so that you can support him in managing his responsibilities? Because I'm
So
sure he's
he
not
does
always
it in
logged into
two
the
ways.
school life. He does it anyway.
No, Yeah, he does it in two ways. So he will
Okay.
take some of the events and copy and paste just the text for the events into his calendar on his phone. And then also he has just a list on a notebook on his desk where he keeps almost like his to-do list of things that he has to do. And that to-do list can be from anywhere from he has to finish a project on, you know, social studies, or he needs to ask me to pick up some craft supplies for the project. And so he'll keep a physical list on his desk, which is helpful to me because then sometimes I can stop by there, help you achieve this project.
Mhm. That is great. So, any advice? Because I feel like in all of these answers, you packed so much about the calendar, and it's more than just the color code, right? How what advice? Because I use my calendar just a place to be, but from our conversations, you taught like the calendar is just a tool to manage yourself, just the things you have to do, right? I haven't even gotten to that point. It's just my places to be. But what are some advice to parents who want to follow in your footsteps, or people like LaToya, that's a bit too much. I mean, I need to do a little more than what I'm doing now, but like, how do they baby steps or figure out, to do all the things that your calendar management? So we're going to do two parts. One who are like, I need to do exactly what you're doing. Give me some tips. And one who's like, that makes sense. I That's a bit
Too
too much
much.
for me, but but I want to do some of it. So like, what are the things that are like the most important if we can't do it all? Yeah.
So I'd say if there's a family who's going to take baby steps into calendaring and using that to prioritize their activities and their schedules, I think that the first step is trying to understand what all your commitments are. Because I think sometimes, I speak individually for myself, is that I'm committed to my family and church and organizations and events. And sometimes those overlap and I have to prioritize. And so just to sit down and think about where your priorities lie, what's most important, is a great first step. Because what I found is sometimes you will realize that as an individual, you are busy supporting an effort or an activity or even an organization that may not even be a priority, but just because of the nature of how you're used to engaging with them or supporting them, you're spending a lot of time, with whatever that effort is. So the first thing is prioritizing and figuring out what's most important to you. If family is most important and you look at your list of activities or you think about how you're engaging and you're not having enough family time, then maybe you need to look at shifting that dynamic and trying to put your time into activities, events, and people, first of all, that are most important to you. And so then the next step is, if you really want to go into developing a calendar that works for your family, is also understanding what will work best for everyone, particularly if you have older children, teenagers, understanding how they want to be engaged in the calendar. Some teenagers are very independent. They want to manage their own schedules. And some would love to have someone just tell them, okay, you need to be here at a certain time and do this event. So it really also depends on the demeanor of your children and how you all want to interact with the calendar itself.
And then the steps for those parents are like, that is great. I want to do exactly what you are doing. How do you, what advice do you have for them to get started?
So I think figure out how you manage your calendar. If you're a parent that works outside of the home, one of the easiest things may be to look at whatever your job or position is. Do you use a calendar professionally? If you do, and you're familiar with it, and you think it has some of the capabilities that you might need personally, that's a good place to start. There's different types of calendars, different platforms. You can look and see how you could potentially share that information from your professional calendar with a personal calendar that you want to build and develop. And that's a good first step. And then next, you can start understanding how to integrate in your personal activities that you prioritize. And you can quickly see if you've overcommitted or if you actually have time and bandwidth to commit to supporting a different event, understanding when your kids have to have different activities or be different places, and being able to do that dance that parents tend to do so well sometimes, of knowing what's coming up and being able to anticipate what the needs are and making sure that we keep our families on track.
Well, thank you so much, LaToya. I have learned so much more than I anticipated. I thought you were just going to teach us how the calendar of many colors, but it really is like the tools of how you manage yourself and teaching your kids responsibility by managing the calendar. So thank you so much. We are done out of time for our cupcakes and convos. So thank you everyone that is tuned in or will watch this on our YouTube channel. And thank you so much, LaToya, for making time to share these gems with us about how to manage our calendar.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Have a great day, everyone, and catch you on the next Cupcakes and Convos.